Oh, hello. My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. So I'm filming my September wrap-up a couple of days early. Like, today is Saturday, so we have today and tomorrow, and I have done everything I need to do this weekend outside of the house, and I have no plans to leave the house again, because September has been a month. It has been a very sad month for me personally. It's been a very busy month because I was in a new job, and I'm already in charge of a lot, considering I don't know what I'm doing yet. And then just writ large in America this last week has just been a real hard one. So it has been a month, and all that to say, I will almost certainly read 3 or 4 more books this weekend, because that is what I feel like doing. But I will just include anything notable in October's wrap up, and I'm just gonna go ahead and do this because honestly I want to film this so that I can focus on reading. So with that being said, let's do some statistics, and then we will get into hits, disappointments, and surprises. Okay, so this month I did read 19 books, which actually is pretty darn good considering I had a lot of kind of reading block, reader's block, just because of everything I was talking about. It's just been a real hard month, and a lot of times when it's a hard month I turn to books, and I had spurts of doing that. But in general, yeah, it didn't feel like a super productive month, but when I looked at my averages and everything, it was a pretty good month. So I did read 19 books, as you can see. Most of that came from my TBR. I mostly was reading ebooks, it looks like, this month, a couple of audio, a couple physical, but yeah, mostly ebooks. And then I had a lot of memoir that I read this month, and then a lot of general and historical nonfiction. That was nonfiction, I guess, basically was a lot of what I read this month. And then as sort of a break, I did have a little tear of romance, contemporary romances I read, along with a couple of mysteries and a few short story collection things. So yeah, overall, not quite as varied as it normally would be for me genre-wise, but it was still a good month. So I read a total of almost 6,000 pages this month, an average of about 300 pages. That's very typical for me. If you watch these, you know that is a pretty average. Average age of books I was reading was about 8 years, which makes me happy. That means that even though I was reading a lot of frontlist, because I got through 6 or 7 arcs this month, I also was reading some backlist, which I like to do. And then the average amount of time on my TBR this month was 9.5 months, which isn't great, but anything under a year I feel pretty good about. So there you go. And a pretty high average rating, almost 3.5 stars. And as you can see in the breakdown of the star distribution, yeah, I was reading a lot of things I really liked. I had 2 5-star books this month. Considering I've only given out 4 5 stars this whole year, that's really good. Let's see how many books I've read for the year. Yeah, I've read 190 books so far this year, and only 4 of them have been 5 stars. So that tells me that was, yeah, a really good reading month. A couple 4.5 star books, which to me means a favorite of the year. 5 stars, an all-time favorite. 4.5 stars, a favorite of the year. A few 4 stars, some 3.5, 5, 3 stars, a couple of 2.5 star things, which were just sort of junky Kindle Unlimited books that I read that were fine but not great. And then I only had 1 DNF, which was, I think it was Love in the Ruins. Yeah, that sounds right. So yeah, overall this was a really, I felt frustrated by this reading month in terms of not feeling like I could focus and get done what I wanted to get done. But if you look at just the stats, it actually was a pretty good reading month. So that can, I guess that tells you something about feelings about a reading month versus the reality. So let's get into disappointments first, because I think that'll be pretty quick. So for disappointments, I had 2 that I wanted to call out, neither of which I need to spend a lot of time on. One was Let Us Now Praise Famous Men by James Agee, which I already talked about in my mid-month check-in, so I'll refer you to that. It wasn't terrible. It was a 3-star book, but it just wasn't as good as I was hoping it would be. And very similarly, Text Me When You Get Home by Kayleen Schaeffer. I listened to this as audio, and I thought it was gonna be more so it's sort of supposed to be about female friendship and the rise of female friendship. That's what I thought it was gonna be, was sort of a social history of the evolving importance of female friendship in Western culture. But it was really a lot closer to a memoir, and I just didn't think it was a very compelling memoir. So I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. fine. It was just not what I was hoping it would be, and I don't think it's anything particularly remarkable, unfortunately. Then I had 4 books that I wanted to talk about as surprising. The first one was Remedial Rocket Science by Susannah Nix. Again, I talked about that in my September mid check-in more, so I'll mostly refer you to that. Basically, I just wanted to re-say that this was probably my favorite new adult book I've ever read, and that was surprising to me because I don't typically like new adult, but this one felt a lot lighter in tone than new adult usually is, and I also felt like it actually reflected what some of the more like day-to-day kind of struggles or conflicts that new adults have. Like when you're in your early to mid 20s, I felt like this felt much more resonant to what that's like than most new adult that I've read. So that was surprising to me. And then the other one, I also mentioned this in my September check-in, but I want to talk about it more here because I think I said I would do that. And that was Make Me by Tessa Bailey. So I thought this was I gave this a 3.5. I thought this was a really interesting contemporary romance, which I think also probably would be considered new adult. I liked it. I enjoyed it ultimately. So it's a friends to lovers trope, which is one of my favorite in contemporary romance. And it is between a kind of a blue collar guy who is slowly building up a construction business in Brooklyn, and a girl who comes from like a kind of trust fund family. And they've been friends, but he's basically been in love with her from the jump, and she's very naive because she had very sheltered life like with her rich family, and she doesn't really realize that's how he feels. And then there's sort of like a chance encounter, and she realizes that she has those kinds of feelings for him too. But what was surprising and interesting to me about this book is that you spend disproportionately, it felt anyway, more time in the hero's head than the heroine, which is a little unusual for that genre. And I think that was a conscious choice by the author because I think this is basically an exploration of the overprotective alpha trope. And I really just admired the way that I think she was taking a lot of things in that trope that are very problematic because he is very jealous and controlling behavior, but you're in his head, and like it is always essentially you very clearly as the reader are not thinking like, oh, it's good that he's so controlling. He is aware that it's a problem, and then she, increasingly, as she is less stressed in other areas of her life, realizes that it's a problem too. And I really liked that. I think the author was trying to explore that trope in a way that highlighted the problematic elements, that you were in the hero's head and you understood that he knew he was being neurotic, basically. Like that's what it all boiled down to was, I'm so afraid that I'm gonna lose you because of this other thing that happened to me. Like he is aware that the way he's treating her is not right, and she increasingly is also aware of that and stands up for herself. So it surprised me that the author was playing with the trope the way that she was. I think being in his head so much gave you the chance to not overly romanticize that behavior, which is something that bothers me in a lot of alpha trope type books, because I think the perception is, oh, the heroine is just like so helpless and he's going to come in and take care of her. And like, that's not exactly what the dynamic here is. Yes, she is very naive, but she's also incredibly smart. She's essentially, the stress she has is because she's having to run her father's business while he's having a mental breakdown. Like she, is under a lot of professional stress, but she's handling it. She's an incredibly kind friend. She has great friends who like are trying to watch out for her. Like I liked that it was playing with an alpha trope in a way that I thought was really interesting. It undercut a lot of the problematic elements, and I felt like really addressed it by the end of the book. Now, it's still going to be your mileage may vary on this because it's still problematic behavior, but I'm okay. Like I like in those kinds of books where the problematic behavior is explored. Like if it's explored and not just, if the authorial voice is not just like, oh, this is fine. I like playing with those tropes and kind of exploring them and seeing sort of what they can do, and new ways. Like I guess basically this just broke some new ground for me in this trope. I'm not saying it's wholly unique, but I felt like it was unique to my reading experience, and therefore it was really surprising to me, and it allowed me to enjoy an alpha trope where I usually don't. So I also appreciated that because it was an opportunity for me to kind of understand some of what I think people really like in those kinds of heroes without having a lot of the elements in it that make it hard for me to read, because the author was aware that his behavior was like neurotic and bad and not just sexy and we don't need to go any deeper into it. Another surprising book for me this month was Go Set a Watchman by Harper Lee, which I have been waiting to get to for a while because I kind of wanted the waters to settle after it was published. I have an entire review of this, so I will link that. Bottom line is, I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about this because it was a very contentious book when it was published, and it's a very beloved set of characters that are being played with, and I actually ended up enjoying this pretty well with a lot of caveats. So again, look at my review if you want to hear my thoughts, but yeah, this was surprising to me. I wasn't sure how I was gonna respond to it. And then the last surprising book I thought I'd throw in here was The Witch at Willow Hall by Hester Fox, which I always want to call The Witch at Wind Hall. I don't know why, but like that is what I want to call this book. That's not what it's called. It's called The Witch at Willow Hall, of Willow Hall. Not sure what the preposition there is. Anyway, Hester Fox. It comes out, when you're seeing this, it will be coming out tomorrow on October 2nd. And I guess it was surprising. I enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. I think it hit me right where I wanted it to, and I didn't realize that's the book that I wanted, which was basically, I wanted a book that was not too scary. Like, I wasn't looking for like a super creepy, super scary book, but I was looking for something kind of lightly spooky, lightly creepy with some kind of gothic romance thrown in and like a historic, like it was just sort of like a lighter toned spooky book, which is what I want to ease me into autumn, because like, come hell or high water, I am getting fall this year. Whether you need to cooperate, because I deserve fall this year. I want it. I'm ready for it. And this book like really got me in the mood. So if you're looking for, I think that this was actually a division of Harlequin. Maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, it definitely has a romantic element, which I didn't know about, but I liked. I thought it was handled pretty well. It's not the main focus of the book, but it's in there. And I really liked all the sister dynamics in it. It is about the titular witch. That is our protagonist. And it's, basically a story about her kind of finding out about her powers. It's set in the early 1800s outside of Boston. Like, it just was a really fun book that hit me where I wanted it to, and it was a book I didn't realize I was in the mood for. But I would really recommend it if you're looking for something, like I said, that has some kind of spooky, creepy elements, but it's not really very dark. Like, it doesn't have a dark tone. At least I don't think it does. I think it always stays pretty not too scary, basically. So yeah, it was just a book I didn't realize I was so in the mood for, but it turns out I was. And then we come to my hits. I had several this month. So first, another one I have a review for, so I will mostly just refer you to that. I read March this month. It was great. I think it's a book that a lot of people would really enjoy. It's a graphic novel memoir about John Lewis, and it's just real good. Recommended. Next, Stand from the Beginning by Ibram X. Kendi. I believe by the time this is going up, yes, my review of this book went up yesterday for Stand from the Beginning, so I will, again, mostly just refer you to that. I will say here that it was just a really thought-provoking, really well done intellectual history. Intellectual history is one of my very favorite types of nonfiction to read. I really enjoyed it. I think it's something that pretty much anyone could benefit from reading. It's very thought-provoking. It might be introductory level to some people, but I do think that it does a really nice job of sort of just orienting you to the topic of kind of the history of racist ideas, particularly in America. So definitely give that one a big thumbs up. It was a huge hit. It was one of my 5-star reads this month. It was just really, really good. The other 5-star read I had this month I liked so much I went ahead and ordered it in hardback. I listened to it on audio from my library, and that is Eloquent Rage by Brittney Cooper. This book is what I've been looking for. It's what I wanted. It is 5 stars because it is like a best of breed. Like, it's one of my very favorites in this genre, which is sort of that kind of nebulous intersection between memoir and essays. Do you know what I mean? Like, where there's a lot of sort of like elements of memoir here, but it's also just essays about essentially Black feminism, like intersectional feminism. And it was just so good. And in this last week that has just 2 weeks, I guess now, the whole like Kavanaugh, Blasey Ford of it all, this book is so good. It talks about like, it's called Eloquent Rage, and a lot of it is about like expressions of female anger. Side note, I also read a book by Rebecca Traister called Good and Mad, which is all about, it's like an argument for how throughout history, female anger in the US has been a strong and like constructive, not destructive political force. That comes out tomorrow, and like congratulations to Rebecca Traister on having the best book karma in terms of timing for a release, because if ever there was a time to release a book about female anger, like now is it. And if you want to read something that reminds you, like, to my ladies out there, if you want to read something that reminds you that like your anger is not bad or a problem, but like actually has done a lot of good in the world, go read that. Okay. Coming back to Eloquent Rage, it definitely does have stuff about, like, especially black women and how they're not allowed to be angry in the same way white women are. Women in general are not really supposed to be angry, but, like, particularly that, like, kind of talking some about, like, how that for black women is especially problematized for them. I think she hits a huge range of issues within intersectional feminism that she did a great job of distilling some sort of like theoretical ideas into something very accessible, comprehensible, and page turning. Like, it's a good memoir. It made me want to find out more about her life. Like, I was interested in what she was telling me about her life, but then it was also so interesting to see her relate her life to the bigger forces that she was talking about. I just loved this book. I thought it was really, really good. Like I said, I ordered a hardback copy of it because I was like, I need this. And another thing that just, like, one of my biggest takeaways, something that I had never heard someone say in this way, like she just said it really effectively. I think she talks really effectively about different types of identities that certain minorities have and how they can be in conflict. And do we identify, I think especially in light of like the 2016 election, for instance, like which kind of category do you most identify with? And so, like, for instance, in the 2016 election, it was very surprising and disheartening to see white women identifying with their race identification more than their gender identification, respectability politics, bullshit, all that stuff. Hopefully people have learned their lesson somewhat there. But anyway, I think she digs into that. And I think one area she does that is with black men. And she talks about how they essentially are always measuring themselves against white men in terms of how much distance there is between them and white men, and then how much distance there is between them and black women, and they're trying to get closer to black men. And so she talks about some of the dynamics within the black community that essentially that tension creates issues with black people, like the black community writ large, because there's a disconnect here on gender and on the patriarchal kind of dynamics that are happening. And I think she speaks to that in a really effective way that was really compelling to me. I'm an outsider. I'm not in the black community. I'm not a person of color, so I can't speak to that. But it's something that I, as an outsider, have sometimes observed in terms of some of the dynamics that I see black women trying to name and kind of getting told to be quiet a little bit about. So it was really interesting to me to see her kind of name those things and talk about them more fully. So anyway, if you can't tell, this is a book that I really, really loved. It's something I would recommend to anyone. I thought it was a great memoir, and I thought it just captured, it talked interestingly about a lot of theoretical ideas in a very approachable way, which I always love seeing. So that was definitely a big hit for me. If you can't tell, it was a very big like nonfiction month for me, mostly. Like, I just was realizing that. It was sort of like, yeah, maybe I just couldn't quite get into fiction except for very light fiction for the most part. So we'll see how next month goes. I have a lot of things that I would like to get to soon, and I'm still trying to kind of figure out my new sort of reading patterns in light of having a job that's a lot more demanding and that I don't have as much energy to focus on literally anything at the end of the day sometimes. So I don't know, I'm still kind of finding a new normal in light of that, in light of some of my family stuff, and yeah, I don't know. We'll see how October goes. I'll be interested to see how things progress, because October and November at work are going to be crazy. Though, because I work in the finance department, I'm hoping the end of the year will be a lot lighter because all the accountants will be closing out the books. So anyway, all that to say, that is my wrap up for the month of September 2018. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely let me know anything you really liked this month that you were reading, or if anything I said intrigued you, let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below, and I will just talk to you guys soon. Bye!